You double-check the lock, though no one's knocking. At first, that kind of caution feels smart. You tell yourself it's about safety, keeping out the noise, the judgment, the small ways people take more than they give. You stop answering certain messages. You keep conversations short. It works for a while. The quiet builds a kind of peace. You can hear yourself think again. Meals taste steadier. Sleep runs deeper. But somewhere inside that stillness, a new tension starts to hum. You catch yourself waiting for something that never comes. A call, a pull, some proof that you're not the only one left in here. The same walls that kept you steady start pressing in. You plan your days with precision, so nothing unpredictable slips through. You rehearse what you'll say if someone asks too much. The rehearsing never stops. It's strange how defense can turn into design, how every rule you set to stay safe begins shaping the world itself. You notice that even kindness feels risky now. A compliment lands and you second-guess it. A friend lingers and you wonder what they want. What began as protection starts to resemble a sealed room, not because you built it wrong, but because you built it to last. Put simply, it's hard to breathe when you've locked the air out too. You've felt how self-protection can harden into distance. Here's what happens when it swings the other way, when safety looks like staying agreeable. You tell yourself you're being fair. You nod. You listen. You take the high road. When someone cuts you off mid-sentence, you let it go. When they joke at your expense, you give a small laugh to smooth it over. It feels adult, restrained, civil. But that calm can turn into a kind of silence you can't explain. Soon you start measuring your tone before you speak, trimming words until they sound harmless. You apologize for things you didn't do. You praise effort that isn't there, just to keep the air steady. On the surface, you're the reasonable one. Underneath, you're tracking every shift in mood like it's weather. People call this emotional intelligence, but it's often training, learned from early moments when kindness was the only safe move. You knew that calm voices meant fewer consequences. You learned to soothe the storm instead of stopping it. That skill still runs deep. When toxicity enters that pattern, it finds easy ground. The other person learns that all they have to do is show irritation, and you'll fold the space around them. Their comfort becomes your assignment. You carry that weight like proof of being good. The irony is that you think you're preventing conflict, but the conflict just moves inside you. It shows up as tightness in your throat, as fatigue after every conversation. The effort to keep things polite becomes its own form of damage. At some point, you start to wonder what maturity really means, if it's balance or just a quieter form of surrender. You already know the feeling of holding everything together. Here's what happens when the body stops agreeing. At first, it shows up small, the way you tense before your phone lights up, or how your chest tightens when a certain name appears in a group chat. You call it stress. You tell yourself it's just a long week. But then sleep goes thin, concentration splinters, and simple choices start feeling like tests. You're not being too sensitive. You're running on empty from too much contact with volatility. When someone's mood decides how your day goes, you live half a step ahead of them. You read tones, track pauses, and adjust before they notice. That hyper-awareness once kept you safe. Now it's costing you everything else. You try to rest, but peace doesn't come. Your mind replays every phrase from the last conversation, editing it for next time. The body stays braced, like it's waiting for impact that never comes. That's not intuition, that's exposure. Constant adaptation to someone else's shifting rules, trains your nervous system to stay alert long after the threat is gone. You catch it most clearly in ordinary moments. Standing in line at the store, you can't decide which checkout lane feels least wrong. Making dinner, you overthink seasoning, worried it might disappoint someone who isn't even there. It's not the situation that's heavy, it's the residue of every moment you've had to manage someone else's comfort before your own. That's where the first crack appears. You stop mistaking exhaustion for empathy. You stop pretending anxiety is insight. There's a difference between awareness and exposure, between being tuned in and being stripped thin. Once you see that, the pattern starts to lose its disguise. You're not fragile for feeling drained. You're responding exactly as anyone would who's been too close, for too long, without protection. The realization doesn't fix it overnight, but it shifts the frame. You begin to ask different questions. Not, what's wrong with me, but what's been happening to me? That change, small as it is, marks the start of release. Notice how the moment of clarity doesn't bring relief right away. It lands, but the ache stays. You start replaying old scenes, wondering how many times kindness became the trap. You remember checking in on someone who never asked about you, covering for a coworker who always forgot, comforting a partner who turned every argument into your fault. The pattern looks obvious in hindsight, but living through it felt like duty. You believed being patient made you strong. Now the strength feels hollow. After every conversation, there's a strange fog, like you gave blood without realizing it. You need quiet, but the quiet stings. You cancel plans, scroll aimlessly, promise yourself rest. The body stops bouncing back. Even small requests feel heavy, as if every favor costs a piece of something you haven't named yet. You tell yourself you're just tired, but this isn't the kind of tired that sleep fixes. It's the fatigue of caring past capacity. When empathy becomes reflex, not choice, you can't tell generosity from self-erasure. You start to dread the sound of your own comfort phrases. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I understand. You hear the lie in them now. People might call you distant or say you've changed. In truth, you're emptying out what was never yours to carry. The confusion comes from losing the role that once made you feel necessary. It's a quiet withdrawal, not from people but from performance. You stop rushing to fill every silence. You let discomfort hang for a moment longer. The first few times your hands tremble, then they don't. That's the hangover of misplaced kindness, the slow return of your own weight. It's uncomfortable because you're feeling what generosity should have left behind: space, not depletion. The truth settles in quietly. Care without boundaries isn't virtue. It's surrender dressed up as grace. At first it seems like balance, doing what keeps the peace, earning trust, staying steady. But beneath that calm, something older is running the show. You learn it early. Approval means safety. Maybe it's a parent's sigh softening after you agree, or a teacher's praise that lands like warmth. You pick up that pattern fast. When everyone's calm, you're safe. When someone's upset, you're at risk. From then on, you make trades no one else can see. You give patience to those who don't return it. You agree to things you don't believe in. You build your worth around being easy to need. That's the invisible contract, your comfort in exchange for their calm. You keep the terms without ever naming them, and you hold yourself to them like law. It plays out quietly. Someone raises their voice and you soften yours. Someone withdraws affection and you try harder. Each gesture feels like choice, but it's compliance disguised as care. You start believing that stability depends on your performance, that if you just say it right, do it right, stay calm enough, love will stay too. Control enters through that door. You learn to read people so closely it feels like foresight. You edit yourself before they ask. You offer help before they admit they need it. On the surface, it looks like empathy. Underneath, it's strategy, a way to prevent the rupture you once couldn't handle. That's why letting go feels dangerous. Breaking the contract means someone else might get upset, and your body still reads that as threat. Even when you know better, the pull to fix and smooth is stronger than logic. You think it's morality, it's memory. Notice how naming the pattern makes it smaller, how seeing it for what it is creates space to choose differently. When you realize the goodness you've been chasing was always about safety, someone else can too. After that realization, the world looks different. You start to test small freedoms, saying "I can't right now," leaving a message unanswered, telling the truth without soft edges. The first few times, it feels like rebellion. Then it feels like breathing. What changes next isn't the people around you, it's the deal itself. You stop trading your calm for theirs. You stop performing peace to keep connection. You begin to learn that love which requires constant management isn't love at all, it's maintenance. You've seen how the contract works beneath the surface. Here's what it costs to keep signing it. When every choice runs through the filter of, will this upset them? Your own preferences fade. You forget what you actually like. Meals, movies, even small decisions start to feel foreign. You wait for cues, a nod, a shrug, some signal that your response will land safely. That's not deference, that's depletion. Over time, the body keeps score. Your jaw stays tight through polite laughter. Your shoulders ache after every social interaction. You carry tension as if it's posture. Sleep turns light, digestion restless. The mind rehearses imaginary conversations, trying to predict the next demand. That's what chronic self-adjustment does. It rewires you to stay on alert, even when no one's asking anything. Trust erodes too. You start doubting compliments, waiting for the hidden cost. When someone says, "You're so understanding," you can't tell if it's gratitude or relief that you didn't resist. Relationships flatten into roles: caretaker, fixer, steady one. You learn to perform empathy without feeling it. Inside, resentment brews quietly. You want to speak, but the words jam somewhere between thought and throat. The more you hide it, the more it leaks through fatigue, irritation, or sudden distance. That's the paradox of staying nice. It keeps the peace outside and breaks it inside. Eventually, even your own reflection in others becomes unreliable. You can't tell who you are apart from what's expected. There's no single moment of collapse, just a slow wearing away. Each small silence, each swallowed truth takes a piece. Said simply, chronic accommodation teaches you to disappear while staying present. It looks kind from the outside, but inside, it's the long burn of losing yourself in real time. Here's what happens when you stop trying to please everyone. It doesn't start with a speech, it starts with a pause. You're mid-conversation when the old reflex stirs, the urge to agree, to smooth, to reassure, but something holds you still. You let the silence stretch a few beats longer than usual. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it changes everything. The first no isn't loud. It sounds like, "I don't think I can make that," or "let me get back to you." You feel the instinct to justify rising up, but you leave it unsaid. That restraint, not the words, but the space you allow yourself, becomes the new ground. Boundaries don't always arrive as confrontation. Often, they sound like stillness. You answer slower, move smaller, listen for what your body says instead of what others expect. That shift rewires something old. It reminds you that respect doesn't need performance to prove it. At first, guilt rushes in. Fast, convincing, familiar. You worry they'll think you're cold or difficult, but then the world doesn't fall apart. The conversation moves on. The fear doesn't match the outcome. Each time that happens, the internal noise loses volume. You notice small returns, steady breath, fewer rehearsed explanations, moments that end without exhaustion. The calm isn't about control anymore, it's about capacity. You're learning that care offered freely carries more weight than care extracted through pressure. Eventually, the no becomes natural. It stops feeling like rebellion and starts feeling like rhythm. That's when you realize the boundary isn't about keeping others out. It's about keeping yourself in. Protecting yourself doesn't mean hardening. It means staying real inside your limits. Here's how to begin. First, notice your body before you notice their tone. The body often knows when a conversation crosses a line. The breath shortens. The jaw sets. The mind starts scanning. That signal isn't weakness. It's data. Step back before explaining. Second, stop defending your boundaries as if they're mistakes. You don't need to justify rest, silence, or space. A short, "I can't right now," protects more peace than an hour of over-explaining ever could. Third, pay attention to recovery, not reaction. Toxic people drain through repetition. Their patterns repeat until you stop answering them in the same way. Break the rhythm even slightly. Decline faster, leave earlier, answer later. Each pause teaches your nervous system safety again. Protection isn't about walls. It's about rhythm, breath, and timing, knowing when to step in and when to step back. The skill isn't escape, it's staying whole. You've seen how a quiet no can change the air around you. Here's what follows after the pattern breaks. The distance you once feared now feels like space. You move through days without scanning for tone or danger. The silence that used to sting has shape to it. It holds rest, curiosity, choice. You don't owe an explanation for every boundary. You just live inside it. Protection stops being about walls. It becomes rhythm, how you pace conversations, when you turn toward others, when you step back. What once felt like withdrawal now feels like breath returning to its natural size. You start trusting your calm again, not the stillness that came from shutting life out, but the steadiness that comes from standing inside it. You say less, but what you say carries weight. You listen, but not to measure risk, to connect. The same instinct that once built an airtight room now builds room enough to live. Safety no longer costs solitude. It costs awareness, care, and a few quiet no's said at the right time. That's how the weight lifts differently now, not because it's gone, but because it finally belongs to you. The air moves freely again. The same air you once locked out now fills the room you built to survive. The walls that once kept you safe now only mark where safety begins and freedom continues. You built the room to last, now you've built it to breathe. You've felt how protection can turn into distance, and how distance can open into balance. This last part is about what happens when boundaries stop being private work. In any group, a team, a family, a friendship, someone's calm becomes a cue. When one person names what's too much, others start measuring their own limits more honestly. That's how boundaries spread, not through rules, but through example. Modeling it doesn't require a lecture. It shows up in tone, timing, and follow-through. You keep your word. You pause before agreeing. You own your no without apology. The steadiness in that behavior teaches safety better than any explanation could. A real boundary doesn't divide. It regulates. It keeps connection clean enough to last. If you want to know exactly how manipulation hides behind charm, guilt, and control, click right here for the Manipulator's Playbook Exposed. If this helped you name something true, pass it forward. Someone near you is still learning where the line begins. Thanks for watching.